Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Tuesday. Hope your work week's off to a good start. Thanks for hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Got Jacob back and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos, and plenty to do as that transfer portal never really stops. Got LSU folks going in. Got a lot of players from around the country going in as well, and LSU starting to set up some visits with some prospects. We'll talk about that. Glen West, go 24/7 with us in 30 minutes. Got to talk to Sharif Ishak in second hour. I want to talk a little Saints running game, specifically Kendre Miller here in the next segment. So lots and lots to do here on this Tuesday. And again, appreciate you hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. We'll start today same way we start every day with a little Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
So now we're starting to get some clarity, and I use that term pretty loosely. We're starting to get some clarity as to some of the players that LSU is going to target in the transfer portal. It's mayhem. There are thousands and thousands of players in the transfer portal, and you just kind of, it's like a dog chasing cars. I mean, there's always another one going the other way. And so based on reporting, some from the national level, some from the local level, we've got an idea as to some of the players early on that LSU is taking some interest in, and that interest may be reciprocated. So let's go through some of these players and how much sense they make for LSU moving forward. And before I get into it, I want to suggest, obviously, as of 5 weeks ago, I didn't feel super awesome about LSU's prospects in 2025. You're talking about a lot of key pieces moving on and then a really difficult schedule. And I'll say this, starting to see some of these names leak out and understand just how much talent is available this time of year for next year's team, you start to look at it and go, oh, you can get a lot better. And we knew that, but at the point you're saying it in November, if you're saying that on November the 13th, you don't know anybody that's going to be in the transfer portal. Now you're starting to see some names, and I can start to, even though LSU's not going to get all these guys I'm listing, I can start to look at some of these players and go, oh, yeah, that makes a big difference. Oh, he would fit there, and you could shore that up. And you start to understand the exact pieces that could come in, not will, but could come in and really make this roster look whole. Yesterday, I went through the top portal needs that LSU had. Talked about wide receiver, talked about edge, talked about safety, talked about tight end. These are places, including the offensive line, you've got to shore up. So let's start to look at some of the names that we know LSU is expressing some interest in right now. Off the top of the list is Luke Hasz. Luke Hasz was a top 100 player in the country. He was a consensus 4-star out of the state of Oklahoma, and he signed with Arkansas 2 years ago. He came on in his true freshman season right out of the gate that first month and was great for Arkansas. Really had an immediate impact on that Arkansas offense. Then he got hurt, and he missed the second half of his freshman season, and he came back this year, and his numbers weren't eye-catching, but he did lead Arkansas in touchdown catches. It was 4, but he led the team in touchdown catches over 2 seasons, which was basically a year and a half because he missed a half a year to injury. He had 42 catches, 577 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He's 6'3". He's over 240 pounds. He's played in the SEC. He is an absolute proven commodity in that way, and he is going to visit LSU today. He's reportedly going to stay through tomorrow, and he's also going to make trips to Ole Miss and Alabama. This is a guy who is from Oklahoma, went to Arkansas, visiting LSU, Ole Miss, and Bama. You get a sense that he wants to be in the SEC. And I feel like LSU's pitch to Luke Hasz is a pretty good one. Just see, these are our 2 guys we got here. You're a little more filled out than those two guys are. You're a little bit more complete a football player than those two guys are at tight end. And oh, by the way, the guy we just had in that position at tight end is probably going to be an All-American and probably going to be a second-day draft pick, and is the most productive player at that position in the history of our school. And oh, by the way, you don't even have to just look at this offense. Go back to Notre Dame where Brian Kelly was just pumping tight ends into the NFL like an assembly line. It's a pretty good pitch. Now, obviously, dollars and cents are going to come into this, and that's where we got to see whether or not LSU is going to play ball at the top of this sport. But it makes a lot of sense that LSU could land Luke Hasz. And I also like when players go into the transfer portal, what the reaction is from that side, the fan base, the media members. And Arkansas fans were really disappointed to see Luke Hasz go in the transfer portal. So that's a guy that really made an impression up there on the Hill in 2 seasons. We'll see if LSU can rule him in. I think that would be a fantastic get for the Tigers. Second player that is starting to be reported that LSU has sincere interest in and looks like has some interest in LSU as well and has already set up a visit. That's Will Helt. He is an edge rusher from Purdue. 6'6", 250 pounds, long, rangy, has filled out, was a 3-star recruit when he signed at Purdue, has played 2 years there, and then last season in 2024, 56 tackles playing defensive end for Purdue, 5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, which is, I believe, 10th in the Big Ten for TFLs. That's production, that's size, that is a position of need. This sounds great to me. Now, he is from the Midwest, and he is going to visit LSU and Texas A&M reportedly. We know that Texas A&M took Nick Scorton from Purdue last year. He had a monster year at Purdue, had a good year at Texas A&M, especially in terms of tackles for loss. The sack numbers were a little bit down, but he's going to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. How good of friends is he with Nick Scorton? And does he feel the same way about Texas A&M that Nick Scorton did? Keep in mind, Helt is from the Midwest. Nick Scorton is from Bryan, Texas, which, if you're unfamiliar, Bryan, College Station are sister cities. So he's literally from the backyard of A&M. That had a lot to do with him becoming an Aggie. I think LSU's got a great sales pitch here as well. You've got Kevin Peoples on staff, who was, I think, integral in the development of Savion Jones and Braden Swinson. And those guys really excelled in their money year, their draft year. And this theoretically is a draft year for Will Helt. He certainly has another year on top of it if he wants to use it, but that would make a lot of sense. This is a guy I would love it if LSU could lock in. But if you're competing with Texas A&M, you better get the checkbook out. It's just the way this whole thing works. Speaking of Kevin Peoples, speaking of big-time talented defensive end, this is not a name that we have had attached to LSU, but one that makes a lot of sense for LSU when you consider relationships. Williams Nwaneri is a former 5-star. He was the number 7 player in the nation, according to On3. He was the number 1 edge player in the nation in last year's signing class. And he signed with Missouri. He was out of Missouri. He signed with Missouri. Who was the edge rushers coach there when he signed? Kevin Peoples. Who was the defensive coordinator when he signed? Blake Baker. I don't know what that relationship is. Stands to reason it's pretty good. If you read the internet on Twitter, you would suggest this is going to be a big-time NIL play. Oklahoma was involved initially. We'll see if LSU can get a seat at the table and have a conversation. Now, Nwaneri was a massive recruit. 6'6", 265, 5-star, top 10 player in the nation, all that. He didn't really do anything this year. He played in 4 games. He had a sack against UMass, and that was it. He did not play a lot for Missouri. But the talent is unmistakable. And there are also 2 more years of eligibility, potentially 3 years of eligibility for this player if you could get him into your program. That's a relationship play. No reports that LSU is in the mix there from a visit perspective, but this is pretty fresh news. He just went in last night. We'll continue on with a couple of guys that we know that LSU has interest in and that have interest in LSU. Jamari Butler announced on Twitter last night that his final 3 are Nebraska. That LSU is involved in his final 3. He is from Nebraska, has played there for 3 years, 7.5 sacks, 65 tackles. He is another defensive end edge player, 6'5", 260. Not a star at Nebraska, but it's somebody that you can potentially develop like Braden Swinson. Braden Swinson was not a star at Oregon. He had like 30 career tackles. He played some outside linebacker. He played some edge. He was kind of just a guy. And he came to LSU, and for a month, really, the season there, that was really impressive. So I think that's a guy that they're going to take multiple defensive ends in this class. I've just listed Helt, Nwaneri, and Butler. So we'll see how things progress there. Last name here on this list for this segment is Zechariah Poyser. He is a safety from Jacksonville State. He is 6'2", 190 pounds. He just finished his redshirt freshman season at Jacksonville State. 47 tackles, 8 TFLs, 3 interceptions. LSU's safety play this year, not nearly good enough. Kylan Jackson just went into the transfer portal. We'll see what happens with Sage Ryan. We'll see what happens with Major Burns. You've obviously got Deshaun Spears, who is on campus here. Jordan Allen has gone to the transfer portal. So you've got a lot of shakeup at the safety spot. You're going to have to take one or two there. And Zechariah Poyser is one of the first guys that they've identified. And keep in mind, not every transfer has to come from the highest level of school. Not every transfer has to come from Alabama. Not every transfer has to come from Ole Miss or A&M. You can find diamonds in the rough elsewhere, and we've seen that consistently all over the conference and in the country. So I'm not going to dismiss Poyser just because he went to Jacksonville State. The measurables are good. He was productive there, and you've got a need for some talent at safety. So these are the first 5 names I wanted to bring to the table. We're probably going to do this segment every day. I think this is going to be an everyday segment for 2 weeks because you're going to get multiple players that are going to visit consistently. Finals are wrapping up all across the country, and you're going to have folks that are going to try to make a decision here in the next 2 weeks where they're playing football next year. Oh, by the way, you got teams that are trying to prepare for bowl games, trying to prepare for college football playoffs, but this is going on as well. So these are some of the names, and quite frankly, I'm good with just about all of them for LSU to take because you're talking about positions where you can't really field a team. You don't have enough edge rushers to field a football team right now. You don't have the requisite amount of healthy wide receivers to function as a football team. And you don't have a tight end capable of putting his hand in the dirt and consistently winning at the point of attack. So there are things that you absolutely have to do. And LSU's in the mix for it. We know that they're on the phone. We know that they're booking visits. And I don't question whether or not they can get guys in for visits. They got everybody in for visits last year. They can get somebody in. It's finishing the deal. And that's where the rubber meets the road on this thing. And I don't know. I don't know what these players are commanding on the open market. I don't know what LSU has to spend. I don't know how judicious Brian Kelly wants to spend about making sure you don't overspend there because you also have to fill here. Like, we just don't have enough data. We don't have a big enough sample size to know exactly how LSU wants to handle this. It sounds well and good to sit back here from the peanut gallery where basically I'm sitting right now and go, well, they got money. They had $1.5 million for Bryce Underwood. Just go pay the dudes. It sounds good. I don't know how much money they have. I don't know what Luke wants. I don't know what Will Helt wants. I don't know what Williams or Nwaneri wants. I have no idea. So I can give you the names as they're reported. I can tell you whether or not it sounds like a good fit. As far as how things finish in this madness that is the transfer portal with agents working the phone line constantly, I'm just going to be in wait-and-see mode on that. So that's kind of where we are right now. As we get more information, we will certainly pass that along, both here on the radio station and, of course, on LouisianaSports.net. That's our Genesis opening drive for this Tuesday. When we come back, I want to spend a little bit of time here on Kendre Miller. I talked about him on Friday leading up to the game with the Giants, but that's a guy that you need to see something from here in the last month. I want to talk about that and what that may mean for the future of the position in New Orleans. That's next on a Tuesday edition of The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Glen West, go 24/7 with us here in about 12 minutes. We'll talk some LSU football as well as some hoops with Glen. I'm going to spend this segment here on the New Orleans Saints, specifically Kendre Miller. I told you on Friday things I was looking for in the Saints-Giants game. Not necessarily whether or not the Saints could win the game. And you saw that it wasn't the most thrilling and riveting game, especially early on Sunday. Just wanted to see some of the young guys. We've seen some really good stuff from both offensive tackles from the Saints this year. We feel pretty confident in those two young corners that they've got out there. But Kendre Miller is kind of a wild card. You just don't know a lot. Of course, you're well aware the Saints take Kendre Miller with the 71st overall pick in the third round of the 2023 draft. And fast forward to his rookie season, he's inactive in week 1. He did not play in week 2. Then he did play in weeks 3 through 9. But it was far from extensive. He got 9 carries for 34 yards in the game in Green Bay. Then 2 weeks later, 12 carries against New England in that blowout of the Patriots, 34-0. But he had 12 carries for 37 yards. Those are the only 2 games in which he had more than 3 rushing attempts until the final game of the season when he did come back against Atlanta, and he had 73 yards on 13 carries. He also had a reception for 6 yards in that game. But it was not a rookie season to write home about. And then you get to year 2, and in the first workout of the first practice in training camp, you go out for an extended period of time. And that's the point where I basically wave the flag and go, I don't need Kendre Miller. This guy's never ready to play. What are they doing? Why are you keeping him around? And I was saying that based on his availability. You've got a guy who gets hurt and he's on the injury list. He's not practicing, and then he goes on IR. And I'm just looking at this going, like, this guy's never going to play. Well, it comes to find out, Ross Jackson, LouisianaSports.net, and Locked On Saints reports that Kendre Miller was like ready to come back, and Dennis Allen was just kind of fed up with him. So he's like, well, you're not coming back. You're going on IR. And so I want to try to be fair here, understanding that I did not have all the information at that time and probably still don't have all the information, but I have new information that suggests, okay, maybe he didn't quite get a fair shake. Maybe Dennis Allen had a bit of an axe to grind because knew he was under pressure, and one of the guys who was expected to help this offense wasn't available enough in his mind, so he just had had enough of it, and he kind of banished Kendre Miller. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's overanalyzing it, but I'm just going to offer that that's a possibility to extend this conversation. And so at this point, you did not have Kendre Miller active for the first 6 weeks of the season. He comes back against Denver. He has 6 carries in that game for 36 yards. Next week against the Chargers, 3 carries for 16 yards. Then inactive for 4 more weeks. He comes back against the Giants, and we knew that he was going to have an opportunity to carry the football. And I was saying, I think this offensive line is getting a little bit healthier. I think they're going to be able to run block against a really bad Giants defensive line. It's time to hammer away, and let's see what Kendre Miller can do. And he averaged 3.2 yards per carry. You see some flashes with Kendre Miller, and that's the first thing you'd like to see. If you never see any of that, well, then you got some issues. There are some flashes. I liked some of the things I saw in the Atlanta game at the end of last year. I liked a couple of the carries in the game against the Giants. There's a little bit of explosiveness. There is athleticism. There's reason to believe, but I'm going to need to see a little bit more sustained production. Now, there was a time 10 weeks ago where you could suggest Kendre Miller was the future of the Saints ground game and the future of the Saints running back position, because Alvin Kamara had not gotten a deal worked out, and it looked like the Saints really weren't interested in doing that. So you were going to have to move on from Kamara once his contract was up, and Kendre Miller would be the guy. Well, now Alvin Kamara has signed, and you are going to have him for 2 more years. And he's going to be the face of your ground game and your rushing attack. How much can Kendre Miller take off of his plate? Because Kendre Miller is still young and cheap. I mean, how often do you need me to say the words young and cheap when I'm talking about the Saints? Constant. It's all I ever talk about. So he is going to be a part of this deal. The question is how big a part? Because honestly, I would really like him to take a significant amount off of Alvin's plate. Right now, Alvin Kamara is not showing a ton of ill effects from being among the NFL's leaders in touches. But you have to think eventually Father Time wins that battle. I don't know if that's this coming Sunday. I don't know if that's the end of this year. I don't know if it's training camp next year. I don't know if it's late next year. I don't know when he's going to certainly lose a step and not quite be as dynamic. And at that point, you'd like to just take something off his plate and dish it over to Kendre Miller. And they kind of tried that on Sunday. I don't know if it was super effective, but I'm not ready to throw all of that on Kendre Miller. But what I will say is, you can't in good faith, expect Alvin Kamara to be Superman for 2 more years. You just can't. You can expect him to be productive. You can expect him to be steady. You can expect him to be durable. He's always been those things. But Kendre Miller's got to do more than he's doing right now. And I was bummed out on Sunday at how ineffective most of what he was doing was. Now, again, there is a piece to that pie that is very much on the offensive line. I get that. There are a lot of factors in place here. And then Derek Carr goes out, and although you were trying to win the game late doing that, like you limit the offense at that point because the teams know what you're going to do. You've got a guy that they're not comfortable with at quarterback and Haener, and you're going to try to lean on the ground game real heavily. Plus, you're trying to run the clock out. So, okay. But that's something in his year 22 season, which is where Kendre Miller is right now. Over the next 4 weeks, I need to feel good about it at some point. They got to get him involved some way. Whether it's traditional ground game between the tackles, whether it's catching the ball a little bit more, the screen game. I need something from Kendre Miller. Now, you don't have Taysom Hill back there to take some of those carries, so if you're trying to run the ball and you want to take it off Kamara's plate, okay, there's your guy in Kendre Miller. You've got him under contract for a couple more years. You're going to have that rookie option. These are important things for this franchise. Every little piece you can add to this roster, every little dollar that you can save elsewhere is a big, big deal for a franchise that's standing at the bottom of the mountain looking up at this rebuild. It's just a long way. And everything you can get to go right matters. And 10 weeks ago, I would have said you're in big, big trouble. I got some new information when Dennis Allen was fired that maybe this wasn't a fair shake. Well, now Dennis Allen's gone. Now Kendre Miller's healthy. Now there's no reason to force feed Alvin Kamara because you're not necessarily in the playoff mix. I just want to see some positives from Kendre Miller here. And that I don't think is too much to ask. And if you can get the offensive line playing well and get a solid ground game going behind them, that is something you can build on going into next season because Penning's going to be back and Fuaga's going to be back and Ruiz is going to be back and McCoy's going to be back. You figure Patrick's back and Kamara and Kendre Miller back. This is your running game. This is what it's going to look like. Foster Moore, this is it. The defense is going to have some turnover. Wide receiver, you've got some work to do there, and we'll see what Olave's future holds. But this is your running game. This is what you're going to be next year. So let's get that thing rolling a little bit. If you're New Orleans, I know Clint Kubiak will give every effort to making sure that happens. If you're looking for Saints content, you can find it on YouTube, Hunt on Saints. We've also got that in podcast form each and every day. Hunt on Saints is what you search wherever you find your sound, and you can find all of our Saints content. Certainly do appreciate that. If you're going to read about the Saints, LouisianaSports.net can help you out with all of that as well. Ross Jackson, all over it there on LouisianaSports.net. Glen West, go 24/7, talking Tigers when we come back on a Tuesday edition of The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. Every car on the lot is online. genesisofbatonrouge.com. Genesis of Baton Rouge is the only fully exclusive Genesis dealer in the state. You may not know a ton about Genesis. That's reasonable. They haven't been here all that long. When I say luxury vehicle, there are probably some brands that pop into your head. Put Genesis right there alongside them. Go check it out. Airline at PQ. That dealership is fine, y'all. It is first class. You walk in, the ambiance is great. The energy in there is fantastic. It's quiet, serene. Got awesome coffee maker with every single type of coffee you could possibly imagine in there, plus the snacks. Their brand ambassadors are fantastic to work with, and you can learn a little bit about this line of vehicles. Get behind the wheel. You'll see the difference. It's so comfortable. Rides are so clean and sleek, and the safety is second to none. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Check them out online, genesisofbatonrouge.com. Every single new Genesis comes with a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Little news coming across the Twitter wire. You can't even refresh fast enough at this time of year. It's just absolute madness. Kamorian Pimpton heading into the transfer portal. We talked at the top of the show about LSU's needs in said portal, and Luke Haas from Arkansas, a tight end that they are welcoming in for a visit, is a guy they're going to target heavily here because they have one tight end on the roster, Trey Green, and he looks more like a basketball player than a tight end. So they got work to do at tight end for sure. Of course, J.D. LaFleur in this class, son of David LaFleur, but that's just two guys. So they've got work to do. Probably multiple tight ends in this transfer portal class. It's been nuts to watch, but that's the nature of what we're doing here in this era of college athletics. Glen West covers it all for Go 24/7, joins us every Tuesday on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Glenn, how are we doing?
Doing great, Hunt. I believe we were around 2 or 3 transfer portal additions at this time last week, and so now we're up to 14. So we'll see if a few more don't hop in, but we're certainly in the thick of it now.
Is that a concern, 14 guys in the portal?
I don't think so. I think really up until today's decision from Pimpton, I don't know that a lot of those guys are ones that you miss. I guess you could make the case for Deshaun Womack. Certainly, I think he probably would have slid in and been a starter for you next year, or at least competed for a starting role. But outside of him and then Pimpton today, I would say those are the two most significant ones. I think you can you kind of build up a lot of those other rooms where you lost some of the depth with some quality players here over the next several weeks. But this, tight end now becomes an absolute must. It's got to be right up there now with safety, with wide receiver, with offensive line, with defensive line. I think all those position groups now are very much all in the same boat.
What is your sense on LSU's ability to land the guys that are visiting Ole Miss, that are visiting A&M, like the top of the transfer portal? My point at the top of the show is I know they can get a visit. They got visits last year. The question is, can you get them? What's your sense on where LSU stands there?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to how much you value those players. And, if there's another school that's out there, I think it's very similar to what Brian Kelly was talking about with the freshmen. If you're going to have a price point, you're going to negotiate. And if another school comes out there and exceeds it, it's just about how much of an appetite do you have for kind of upping your price and trying to figure that out. So I think with the portal, it's so much harder with the portal to develop those quick relationships. You really have to make a strong pitch for playing time. And then, obviously a huge piece of it is the finances with the portal. You really can't, I don't think, build up a whole relationship with a player off of one meeting or a couple of days of interaction with them. So you have to make sure that the pitch and the visit is compelling enough, and obviously the financial part of it is something that I'm still in a wait and see mode with this group. We haven't seen them open the bag for a lot of these highly touted transfer portal guys. They've obviously hit on several of them over the last couple of years, whether it's Jaden Daniels or Mekhi Wingo, or you just go down the line of a couple of the guys that they've landed here over the first couple of cycles. But we'll have to just wait and see, because they need a lot of help, a lot of starter caliber help at a lot of different areas. And I just don't know what the funding looks like and just how aggressive they're going to be in terms of getting those guys to campus if other schools are making big pushes as well.
How differently do you think Brian Kelly feels about assembling a roster than he did 12, 15 months ago?
I think if you listen to his press conference last week, he sounded like a coach that has really going to have to alter his thinking, I think, going forward. And, whether that's recruiting freshmen and transfers in the same kind of way, I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's something we have to figure out over the next year or two with how LSU recruits and what kind of guys they land on a year in, year out basis. But I think this whole thing is, it's shaken all the coaches around the country, and kind of just having to reevaluate maybe how they've practice things in the past and how they have to kind of quickly develop a new way of thinking and how to build a better roster for your team. I think it's so year to year now. That's one of the things that I took away from, when Will Wade was here as the basketball coach. He just talked about how you just have to plan for 1 year ahead. You really can't afford to plan for 2 or 3 years ahead in any sport now. And that certainly is the case with football, and how quickly these guys hop into the portal and how much roster turnover you have. You could see 50, 60% of your roster turnover on a year in, year out basis, and you really have to be able to be not only diligent in your evaluation, but also with your pitches, and certainly with the NIL part of it as well, to develop those relationships and get those high quality players on board.
You mentioned Will Wade. I mean, Jay Johnson said it too. He said it's year to year, it's roster to roster. I mean, I think when that class that he had that had Kling and Neal and all those guys in it, and he kind of thought that was going to be the next iteration of what LSU was going to be post Cruz and Dugas and all that, and then all those guys up and left. It was kind of like, well, I guess you just got to go get a bunch of new guys, and that's the way that you've got to handle it. Obviously, what are your thoughts on Garrett Nussmeier right now?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we haven't heard anything yet. I mean, I'm not hitting the panic button or anything, but because I do ultimately think that he comes back, but I think he's being very diligent right now in his conversations with whether or not he wants to go pro. I mean, this is a very light quarterback class in terms of, the talent. I think most people are kind of in agreement there that this isn't as deep of a talented quarterback class as maybe there have been in recent years, or even when you look ahead to 2026 and just kind of the big names that could pop in that class. So I think there's a lot for Garrett to think about right now, but I do know I take him for his word that he loves LSU. I think he, in a perfect world, would love to come back here, but if there's a team out there, and his dad is as connected as anyone in the NFL in terms of the scouting and what teams are thinking about the quarterback class for this upcoming draft, he's going to get a lot of great information from him, and certainly have a decision to make. But if some team slaps a first or high second round grade on him, it's going to be a lot to turn down for him to come back and to continue to improve on his progress that he made this year.
Let's talk a little bit of hoops before we let you go. Tigers get a win on Sunday. Didn't get off to a terrible start, but it was life without Jalen Reed for the first time. What did you make of LSU's performance before finals on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, really impressed with the front court performance. I mean, that was something we talked with Coach McMahon and certainly the players about after the game. Damian Collins and Corey Chest. Chest has a double-double with 12 points, 12 rebounds. Just a really active defender and a guy that I think can create a lot of havoc for an opposing offense. So I really love watching him play. But really the surprise to me was Damian Collins, because he had 18 points in that game, and really it wasn't all put back dunks or anything like that. He actually showed some nice footwork on some shots around the paint. He was comfortable. He shot 3 threes in that game, made one of them. His stroke looked pretty smooth from what I saw on those 3 shots. So if they can get that kind of offensive output from Damian Collins, that is a huge storyline for this team going forward. But so I was really impressed with the front court play. It was a little bit of a mirror, kind of mirror game in terms of how this team has been this year. It's usually been getting off to fast starts and or getting off to slow starts and finishing off well in the second half. But really, they got off like gangbusters in this game and opened up a 20-point lead. And then second half, they really struggled to shoot the ball for most of the half. And they were able to kind of hold on to their lead, but they didn't really kind of extend on it, and they actually allowed it to become a 9-point game. So I think this team is on the right path. I mean, look, I think this Jalen Reed thing is going to be big question marks come SEC play, but I think in the short term and through the non-conference schedule, they can get through pretty unfazed here. But once that conference schedule gets here, I think you could really see the impact of what Jalen Reed not being around is going to have on this team.
How big is Saturday for this team against SMU in Frisco?
Yeah, it's another chance to get a high-quality win against a Power 4 team. They've got a couple of them already against Kent State and UCF and Florida State, of course. Those are all 3 big wins in non-conference play. But, look, SMU is going to be a different kind of challenge. I haven't done a huge dive into what they've done in terms of this season so far, but another opportunity to get I would assume a quad 2, quad 1 kind of victory on your resume. And it's really the last big non-conference opportunity that LSU has to improve on their resume. I mean, they have a couple of tinier games here over the last couple weeks of December before SEC play comes about, but this is a huge one for LSU in terms of just continuing to build that momentum, they have a week to prepare for this game, so you would hope that they come in well rested and well prepared, and I think it's going to be an interesting game to find out just kind of how competitive this team will be without Jalen Reed and what that front court, what those front court minutes will do for LSU going forward.
Get back to refreshing Twitter and see who's back in the portal. We'll talk next week, Glenn. Thanks, man.
Yeah, hopefully not two or three more players and hop in over this 10-minute interview. Thanks, Hunt.
Can't rule it out. That's Glen West, senior writer at Go 24/7. All your team coverage, recruiting coverage. They got you covered over there at Go 24/7. I'll react a little bit to Kamori and Pimpton there, and then I want to talk about what we saw last night on the national stage as well. We'll do all that to close out hour number 1 coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Got to make LeBear's Baton Rouge your game day headquarters this season. Watch all the games on their giant TVs. Tackle the area's best game day food and beverages with all of your friends. I've told you time and time again how great a game watching experience it is at LeBear's Baton Rouge. Get on by ESPN Bet and see for yourself. Fantastic drink specials. Great setup for watching the game, whether it's with friends or a solo seat. And you can watch all the football and basketball action and bet on it with Penn Play and the ESPN Bet app. Penn, the online sportsbook, is now live in Louisiana. You can score big this season at LeBear's Baton Rouge. However you want to play. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700 for help.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show with former Texas A&M Yell leader, Hunt Palmer. Giga Maggies.
All right, wrapping up hour number 1 here. The news, I talked about it right there at the beginning of that segment with Glenn, but wanted to circle back to it. Kamori and Pimpton becomes the latest LSU Tiger to jump into the transfer portal, now bumping up towards 15 players that have entered the transfer portal since LSU and Oklahoma played back a week and a half ago. I've done this a number of times, so we're not going to go through the entire thing again, but it's worth mentioning, and I think that this is going to be... We're trending this way, but I think this is extreme. I do believe this is extreme. That LSU, from the 2022 class that was ranked 5th in the nation, 7 of the top 10 players in that class are already gone after 2 seasons. 17 are gone in total. There were 26 in the class. So you've had 17 players enter the transfer portal. I'm including Trey Holly in there because that's a weird spot because he's not in the transfer portal, but he's not playing football. So 17 have left, 9 have remained. The players that have left, Lance Hurd, who was 5-star, Deshaun Womack, 5-star. Toviano has stayed. That's the highest rated player in their class that's still here. Jalen Brown left last year. Shelton Sampson's in the portal. Jackson Howard's gone. DJ Chester's here. He started for you at center this year. Kamori and Pimpton's gone. Whit Weeks is here, had an all-conference type level year, but Kylan Jackson is gone, and that's your top 10 with Caleb Jackson, who is a reserve running back for you. The rest of the way, Tyree Adams still here, Ricky Collins is gone, Mac Markway is gone, Trey Holly's not here, Ryan Yates is gone, Kyle Parker's hurt, Kai Prian's gone, Christian Brathwaite's gone, Jeremiah Hughes is gone, Paul Mabenga still here, Jackson McGowan's gone, Michael Doherty's gone, Dylan Carpenter still here, Ashton Stamps is a starter for you, and Connor Gilbreth gone. I just think that's jarring that 7 of the top 10 players in that class. I mean, think about when LSU signed that class, what you personally thought about what Lance Hurd would be, what you thought Deshaun Womack would be, what you thought Jalen Brown and Shelton Sampson as a duo would be, what you thought that Kamori and Pimpton was, and LSU flipped him at the 11th hour with that 6'6" frame. Kylan Jackson, big-time safety. Caleb Jackson, their top 10 running back in the nation. It just hasn't worked out. The most impactful players from that class are a center that had his struggles learning a new position, a linebacker who made a ton of tackles in Whit Weeks, DJ Chester, obviously the center, and then Ashton Stamps, who plays for you at a corner. Like, that's, through 2 years, that's been your biggest contribution. That sets your program back. It just does. And I don't know exactly where to nail down 100% of the blame, because that's always what we want to do. It's this person's fault. It's these kids' fault. It's the head coach. Like, everybody's trying to hammer home blame. I'm not really interested in why this happened. But I'm just telling you, when you've got a class in their second year that contributes that little, it is difficult to make up that difference. It is. And I just think that set the program back. Now, you can fix it in the portal. We all know this. But, man, is that a tough thing to sit there and scroll through when you consider how excited we've been over the years on National Signing Day. Now, if this happened 7 years ago, your program would be shot for 2 years. They wouldn't leave in these numbers because you'd have to sit out a year. But, man, if you had a class that produced this little 2 years in, 5-7 years ago, you couldn't recover. Now, LSU's job is to go recover. I wanted to briefly touch on this before we get to the end of the hour as well. It's a total shift. But I'm sitting there last night, and I'm watching Troy Aikman just gush over Joe Burrow's play and how he's his favorite quarterback to watch, and he does things as well or better than anybody in the NFL. And I'm watching Jamar Chase just absolutely eviscerate the Cowboys defense, as he does to just about everybody every week. And yes, it's more sustainable if you create a roster like Alabama did for 15 years or like Georgia has for the last 5, where there just seems to always be the next guy. But we haven't necessarily had that in Baton Rouge. We've had talented rosters. You've had rosters that put guys in the NFL, but there have been holes, and there have been a lot of 8 and 9 win seasons and not a lot of 11, 12 win seasons. For LSU, it's kind of when the stars align that everything shakes out. And to think about the stars that aligned on that roster with Burrow and Chase and Jefferson, and you look at the NFL statistically, and you see Jefferson and Chase as the top 2 wide receivers in the sport, and you look at what they will be here soon with Jefferson's already signed the massive deal, and Chase is about to get his, and Burrow's already got his, and you look at what we watched here over that course of 4 months, I really believe that I did not take it for granted. I really believe that I enjoyed the excellence and savored it. But it goes by pretty quick. And now we sit here and it's been 5 years. But you're reminded every Sunday when you turn on the TV and Jefferson's just cooking, and Burrow, despite the fact that the team can't win a freaking game, is playing at an MVP level, and Chase is the best wide receiver in the league. I think if you asked 50 NFL fans to name the top 2 wide receivers in the NFL, how many would say Jefferson and Chase? Like 40? More than 40? You've got the 2 best wide receivers on the planet. They were on one team with the guy who's playing quarterback as well as anybody. You want to tell me Lamar or Josh Allen's playing better than Burrow? I'm not going to argue with you, but Burrow's right there on their level. As far as production, touchdown passes, all that kind of stuff, he's right there. They're not winning games like they should be. But to have those 3 guys, along with the highest paid center in league history, Damian Lewis, who's starting at a guard, Clyde went in the first round. I mean, y'all know, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but I've said this many times in the past as well. Like, I'm just not going to get tired of talking about that. And maybe somebody from Tuscaloosa could come over here and tell me that I was, clinging on to the past and loser mentality. Well, I'm going to Texas Bowl here in a couple of weeks, so I don't have a lot to grapple on with here. I'm just going to remember just how great that was, and you continue to be reminded of it every single Sunday when you turn on the TV. Special group of dudes, and they were on display last night. Shout out to the guy for the Cowboys who tried to pick up a blocked kick like a not very smart dude. Bengals won because of it. I'll take it. All right, that'll wrap up hour number 1 here. We'll come back, got lots to do in hour number 2. Portal continues to roll. We'll talk some Saints with Sharif at the bottom of the hour as well. Come back after Sports Center. It's the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. Look, closet space is not something that a lot of guys think about, especially growing up. But sometimes you move in with a lady like I did, and she looks at the closet situation in your house and says, this sucks. Well, we moved to mitigate that. That was always the plan. You don't have to move to get brand new closet space, custom closet space. And it can make all the difference. It certainly has in our house. David Duvall and his team are happy to do that for you. They can help you with your closets. They can help you with your bathrooms. You need financing options. They can do that for you as well. 18 months, 0% if you qualify. It's a great time to pick up the phone and call David Duvall, or you can check him out online at OneBathAndClosets.com. It's David Duvall on One Bath and Closets. You can find him online, OneBathAndClosets.com.